Hello and welcome. Welcome everyone to this live Great Lakes Clean Water Telephone Town Hall meeting we have for you today. I see we do have some folks on the line with us right now. Thank you so much for joining us here early. Please stay on the line as we do connect to more and more of your neighbors. So if you're just answering the phone now, hello and welcome to this live telephone town hall meeting. Standing by, we have State Senators Winnie Brinks, Sean McCann, Paul Wojno, Jim Ellison, and Rosemary Bayer. Tonight, you will be provided with an updated information, and as you listen, be thinking of questions that you would like to ask during our live Q&A section of the call regarding water issues that are important to you. We are simulcasting in a few places today, so here's how to participate. The way to get your question in line if you're listening via the phone is by pressing 0 on your phone keypad. Again, that's pressing 0 to submit your question. We will be taking your questions live. However, if you would prefer me, the moderator, to read your question over the air, we will be more than happy to do so. So simply let your operator know that that is what you would prefer. If you are participating via Zoom tonight, you can submit your question by using the chat feature on your Zoom platform. I will be reading those over the air for you. And we are also sharing today's meeting on Facebook. So if you're on that Facebook live feed, go ahead and comment with your question. Lastly, as far as participation goes, you have the option of pressing 7 to receive important updates by providing one of our operators with your email address. You can press 7 to do so now or at any time throughout the call. It's always a great idea to stay as up to date as you can, and that's the way to do it. So for anyone who is just joining us, we would like to welcome you to this live Great Lakes Clean Water Telephone Town Hall meeting with Michigan State Senators Winnie Brinks, Sean McCann, Paul Wojno, Jim Ellison, and Rosemary Bayer. Tonight, they do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to ask questions regarding water issues that are important to you. If you're listening in on your phone, submit your question by pressing 0 on your phone keypad. We will be taking your questions live, so if you prefer not to go live, please just let your operator know and I will read those over the air. So whatever you feel is most comfortable works for us. Either way, press 0 to submit those. Again, if you're participating via Zoom, you can submit your question by using the chat feature on your Zoom platform. I will be reading those over the air for you. And we are also sharing today's meeting on Facebook. So if you're on that Facebook live feed, go ahead and comment with your question. Tonight, we will also be asking for your feedback through a couple of poll questions. So if you're on the phone or you have joined us on Zoom, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. So if you're participating via the phone, you'll vote by pressing the number on your phone keypad that corresponds to your answer. And if you're participating via Zoom, please select your choice on the question that will appear on your screen and press submit. Lastly, we have operators standing by if you would like to press 7 to provide your email address for any updates moving forward. So again, you can press 7 now or at any time throughout the call. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and officially get us started off by turning it over to Lisa Wozniak, who serves as the Executive Director of the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this very special virtual town hall discussion. We're excited to have an outstanding lineup of elected leaders who will speak and answer questions tonight about an extremely important issue: clean, safe drinking water and protecting our majestic Great Lakes. My name is Lisa Wozniak. I serve as the Executive Director of the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, and we're a nonpartisan organization that works to protect the air, land, and water in communities all across Michigan by activating voters to elect and hold accountable public officials to fight for an environment that sustains the health and well-being of all of us. I'm very excited to serve as your moderator for this discussion tonight. The speakers are outstanding, and you'll hear directly from a number of key elected officials, including Senator Rosemary Bayer, who represents Michigan's 12th Senate District, encompassing much of Oakland County in Southeast Michigan. Senator Winnie Brinks, representing Michigan's 29th Senate District in Kent County and Greater Grand Rapids. Senator Sean McCann, who represents Kalamazoo County and Michigan's 20th Senate District. Senator Paul Wojno, who represents Michigan's 9th Senate District in Macomb County. And finally, we have State Representative Jim Ellison with us tonight, who represents Michigan's 26th House District, made up of Royal Oak and Madison Heights. We are really grateful for your time with us today, Senator Bayer, Brinks, McCann, Wojno, and Representative Ellison. So welcome all of you to this town hall. Each speaker brings a unique perspective and experience, which bodes very well for this lively and informative discussion about challenges facing our drinking water and our beloved Great Lakes and what can be done to protect them. For an icebreaker and introduction, I'd love to hear from each of you about why you chose to spend time with us tonight. Why did you prioritize tonight's conversation about protecting drinking water in the Great Lakes when you have so many other things that you could be doing? Let's start with Senator Bayer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Senator Rosemary Bayer, and I do represent the center, the middle of Oakland County, which is on the east side of the state and includes a number of cities like Clarkston, Pontiac, Auburn Hills, as well as quite a few townships and villages such as Bloomfield, Keble Harbor, and Lake Orion. And water is a huge part of my district. We have lakes and waterways everywhere, which is fantastic, but comes with some number of challenges. In fact, my office has received hundreds of letters and emails from families, seniors, even school kids about clean water and the need for us to take action and protect the water. So, and recently, folks in my district have been facing very costly basement flooding from storms, as well as beach closures due to high levels of bacteria in the water because of stormwater runoff. Even just a few weeks ago, the Pontiac Recreation Area was closed for these very reasons. And we've seen it in other lakes in my district and around the state that we're seeing these challenges. There's stormwater runoff and basement flooding, water from heavy precipitation that our infrastructure just can't handle, mixes with what it encounters along the way. So we are struggling. We have heavy precipitation. We have grease, fertilizer, bacteria, toxic chemicals, all kinds of things mixing in. So, and in my district, we see stormwater and sewage water sharing the same pipes. And when those pipes can't keep up with the volume, it can end up in our basements, in our homes. Stormwater runoff can impact the life of creatures living in the water, as well as ending up in our drinking water. So we do have significant water issues around the state, affecting the people and the economy in my district and around Michigan. So all of those things together are why I came today. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Senator Bayer. Let's turn to Senator Brinks. Why are you here tonight with us?
Thank you, Lisa, and good evening to everybody who's tuning in today. This is such an important conversation for us to have right here in Michigan. We're home to just a huge amount of the world's fresh water, and so it is our duty and responsibility to make sure that we are good stewards of that. I do represent about 40% of Kent County that's centered around the city of Grand Rapids and surrounding suburbs and a few townships. And in my district, especially in the northern part of the county, a big issue has been PFAS contamination. And PFAS is a toxic combination of chemicals that are man-made. They've been manufactured for several decades now, and they are used in a variety of industries throughout the United States since the middle of the last century. So we're going on around 70 years. These chemicals are known as forever chemicals. They accumulate in the body and they do not break down in our environment. So once they're in our water, they are there for good, just about. Excessive exposure to PFAS has been linked to issues, a lot of health issues like some cancers, thyroid disorders, elevated cholesterol, fertility issues, and lots of other diseases. As of late last week, Michigan has identified nearly 200 PFAS sites in areas of interest or suspected contamination throughout our state. They're in the Upper Peninsula, they're in West Michigan, Mid-Michigan, east side of the state, and there will inevitably be more locations where we do find PFAS in our water. So my focus as a legislator has been on ways to regulate PFAS, to help residents affected by it. And since it is discovered generally long after the exposure has happened. We've been working really hard with people to help them have ways to achieve justice after the fact, to make sure that PFAS gets cleaned up from our drinking water before it gets sent out to our homes and businesses and schools for consumption. And we're also working hard to make sure that people have recourse when it comes to dealing with the health impacts and maybe the financial impacts on their properties, and to make our law reflect a fair playing field when it comes to that kind of recourse. So I am very excited to be part of this panel tonight to talk about the work that we've done in Michigan regarding PFAS and other water quality issues. And I will hand it back to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Senator Brinks. Let's turn to Senator McCann. Oh, he just went off camera. So are you there? All right, over to you.
All right, great. Lisa, thank you. I am State Senator Sean McCann, and I represent Kalamazoo County, all of Kalamazoo County in West Michigan, about an hour south of Senator Brinks. And we also have had no shortage of water quality issues here, unfortunately. And this issue continues to be a great passion of mine as a state senator. For example, in 2010, areas of my Senate district were unfortunately home to one of the largest inland oil spills in our nation's history, when a pipeline ruptured and released tens of thousands of gallons of oil into the Kalamazoo River. This, as you can imagine, was a disaster. It impacted wildlife, but it also displaced and harmed the health of families whose homes were evacuated and ultimately destroyed by the oil that ran for 40 miles downriver. And to this day, the state is still monitoring the health of aquatic life in the area and still doing other restoration work. And this same company, I would point out, that was responsible for this disaster, Enbridge of Canada, wants to keep maintaining a 70-year-old pipeline under the Great Lakes, under the Straits of Mackinac, that's already been struck by anchors and is 20 years at least over its expected service life at this time, and could have a great catastrophe unleashed on all of our Great Lakes if we had a similar disaster to the one we had in Kalamazoo County. We can't have that happen, and I firmly support the shutting down of Line 5. More recently, again, with the introduction provided by Senator Brinks, residents and communities of my district, the city of Parchment, Cooper Township, Richland Township, and surrounding areas have also been impacted by the contaminant PFAS found in their drinking water just a few years ago. Since then, I've been engaged in weekly conversations with state and local government leaders and health officials from these areas, and have fought for reasonable state funds to assist with the most urgent cleanup efforts related to this. You know, in many of these cases, a root problem tends to lead back to the manufacturers and corporations making millions of dollars off their products, but putting none of it towards ensuring that it doesn't contaminate the water my residents use to drink, bathe, and clean. I'm really happy to join this panel because I think polluters should be held accountable for their actions and pay for the damage they cause to the environment and public health.
Thank you very much, Senator McCann. Let's turn to you, Senator Wojno. I'd love to hear about why you chose to be with us this evening.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Lisa. I'm State Senator Paul Wojno, and I represent a portion of Macomb County that's just adjacent to the north border of Detroit. And my 9th Senate district is comprised of the communities Warren, Centerline, East Point, Roseville, Fraser, and a small portion of Clinton Township. I've joined my colleagues on this panel because I'm committed to do whatever needs to be done to protect and maintain our water. It's a central component to our economy and quality of life. For me in my district, our top water quality issues are sewage and E. coli in and around Lake St. Clair. Unfortunately, aging sewer systems mean the lake is often subject to sewage overflows, and the beaches are all too often closed because of E. coli. Almost at any time there's rainfall, the stormwater and sewage mix spills over and finds its way into the lake. And the same is true when the snow melts and we have the spring thaw. Lake St. Clair serves many uses. It's a recreational lake, It's an international shipping channel and a source of drinking water for much of southeastern Michigan. More than 40% of Michigan residents get their drinking water from the lake, the St. Clair River that feeds it, or the mouth of the Detroit River. I'm just proud to be part of this legislative caucus that recognizes this and so many other water quality issues.
Thank you, Senator. Last but not least, I'd like to turn things over to State Representative Ellison.
Thank you, Lisa. I come in here with a kind of a different background from my senator colleagues as a representative. I came into this as 13 years of mayor of the city of Royal Oak. I was mayor during the large storm of August of 2014. I was on the front lines of dealing with that, as they call it now, 100-year storm, which is coming every 3 years now. But in dealing with the overflow we had, Royal Oak, being a 100-year-old community, is built on a combined sewer system. For those that don't know, that means your sanitary waste and your storm waste go into the same line, and they head downstream. We also are hosts, Madison Heights and Royal Oak, we host the water treatment plant for the 12-town drain. 12-town drain is the drainage system for all the 12 towns in Oakland County that are northwest of us. We are at the bottom of the hill. All the water runs downhill into our communities, into the water treatment plant at 12 Mile and I-75. During that particular storm back in 2014, we overwhelmed the treatment plant and there was overflow. There was untreated water and sewage that was dumped into the open cut of the Red Run Drain, which runs through our neighboring county, through Macomb County, and dumps into the St. Clair River. And we were very concerned that these storms are now coming more often, and we've got to update the facilities to make sure we're catching as much as we can. That whole situation was compounded back in January of 2020 when we had a situation of a polluter, a business in the city of Hazel Park, that was sitting on top of very contaminated soil, and it was overflowing. And we discovered, as some of you may remember, it was on the news as the green ooze, that it was following a path down the hill and was going on to I-696. And it made a big splash, literally, in the area. And we embarked on a plan with the EPA and the Eagle to clean that site up. As of right now, we have cleaned up the perimeter of the site. The building itself, which is still very contaminated, is caught up in litigation, so we haven't done that yet. So this process continues to be a threat, and we continue to watch it. And I'm involved here because I want to hold these bad actors responsible, hold them accountable for the actions that they are causing and potentially contaminating our drinking water and our lakes. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Representative Ellison, and thank you, Senators, for your remarks. It is very clear why you are here this evening and what issues related to water quality in our Great Lakes are important to you and your constituents, and what you're doing to take steps to deal with some of those problems. I'd like to turn things to our moderator right now for the first poll question of the evening for those tuning in. I believe that our moderator has posted, for those of you who are seeing this on a screen, which lake is your favorite Great Lake? Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior? Is it too hard to choose? Please cast your vote. We'd love to know what you think.
Yes, Lisa, thank you so much. And again, if you're on the phone or you've joined us on Zoom, again, we just greatly appreciate your feedback here. So if you're participating via the phone, you'll vote by pressing the number on your phone keypad that corresponds to your answer. And if you're participating via Zoom, go ahead and select your choice on the question that appears on your screen right now. So that question one more time here, which is your favorite Great Lake? So pressing 1 for Huron, pressing 2 for Ontario, pressing 3 for Michigan, 4 for Erie, or you can press 5 here for Superior. So once again, voting right now, which is your favorite Great Lake? Selecting 1 here for Huron, 2 for Ontario, 3 for Michigan, press 4 for Erie, and 5 for Superior here. And I just want to give a quick reminder that if you're listening in via your phone, you can still press 0. Get your question in line. Again, if you're participating via Zoom, you can go ahead and submit your question by using the chat feature on your Zoom platform, and I will be reading those over the air for you. And for those folks on Facebook, please go ahead and comment with your question. Another reminder, you can also press 7 now or at any time to provide one of our operators with your email address to receive any updates moving forward. Thank you all so much. Lisa, right back to you.
Thank you. We've heard a lot from our panelists today about some of the threats facing our water in Michigan. And this is a big deal because it relates directly to our health and our well-being, our natural resources, and certainly the constituents in each of these districts care a lot about the drinking water coming out of their taps and whether or not they can go to a beach and safely have their children play on that beach, as example. So I'd like to dig into some of this a little further, and I'd like to start with a question for Senator Bayer. A lot of problems with water quality tend to happen because of, as you alluded to, poor infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what you and your colleagues are doing to address that?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, for sure. So in general, we often think of infrastructure as roads. That seems to be the normal answer, but infrastructure really does include critically the pipes that are underground that make up our water systems, and that stuff is old. Michigan, like the rest of the country, really has historically underfunded this infrastructure. It's kind of like your furnace or your water heater. You just really don't pay attention to it until it breaks. Well, guess what? Our infrastructure now is really quite broken. It's old. Much of it is from the 1930s. It's decaying and completely inadequate to handle the number of people and the increasing severity and frequency of storms due to our changing climate. Representative Ellison just mentioned the 100-year storms that he lived through as mayor, and coming more often. I will say that we've had 3 100-year storms already this summer. So 100-year storms are becoming more like 1-month storms. Definitely things are changing. So just recently, my Democratic colleagues and I in the House and the Senate, we introduced a $5 billion climate resilience plan to invest in upgrading our clean water, stormwater, and wastewater management infrastructure. It's long overdue and it's only getting worse. So it is time for us to act. And so the plan we introduced will provide funding to upgrade, repair, and even separate the stormwater and wastewater systems. It provides funding to municipalities and residents to connect to existing or new sewer systems, replace failing septic systems, which now many are currently leaching toxins into our water system. And there's many other new resources and tools to begin the necessary water system improvements throughout the state. We're working on the funding, state funding, as well as advocating with our congressional representatives. We know that the federal money that we've already gotten in from the ARP funds includes opportunities for water infrastructure. And now our congressional representatives are working on a federal infrastructure plan that will include hopefully much more. Health water systems is a big part of that plan, especially here in Michigan. We are the water state. So the bills that are part of this initiative will be formally introduced quite soon. But right now, this includes one of the bills that we've already introduced. My bill, Senate 593, will help local governments better prepare for flood events and how they manage the resulting stormwater runoff by establishing a framework for local municipalities to develop their own stormwater utility systems and legally collect fees. This enables those municipalities to make sure developments manage their own stormwater, or the local municipality can do it for them. They can collect the fees and put the funds towards those projects, things actually needed, versus what outside utilities are willing to do. So this way they can, and this is what we need, right? The ability to protect residents and businesses from those floods.
Thank you very much, Senator Bayer.
Thank you.
I would like to move to Senator Brinks and ask a question about PFAS. This is something that you mentioned in your opening remarks, toxic per and polyfluorinated compounds, as we now refer to them as PFAS. It seems to be something that's becoming more familiar to so many people across the state. And this has been deemed a major environmental issue impacting human health, wildlife, and waterways all across Michigan. Can you talk about your work on this issue and why we need to stay on top of it?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. We here in Kent County, we started hearing about PFAS contamination in well water in the northern part of the county in 2017. It was the summertime, and I kept seeing a series of articles done by some really excellent journalists who were really digging in and finding out what was going on. But there were just grassroots individuals who were asking a lot of questions and trying to figure out what was really going on with their water. Due to a lot of kind of hard work and sleuthing on their part, these stories came to light. And so I started paying a lot of attention because, of course, water is one of those things that I believe is a human right, and having clean drinking water that doesn't make you sick seems like one of the most basic things that we can do for our constituents. So I was really interested and started really educating myself on what was going on. Since then, I kind of had to start pounding a drum to try and get other folks to pay attention to it. And so I repeatedly brought it up with regulators at the state level. It took a long time to get the departments and state government's attention and to get them to really focus on it. But it really became clear that the community was not going to tolerate not having the answers that they needed when it came to the cleanliness of their water. So I proposed a bill back in 2017 to create maximum contaminant levels allowed in drinking water of these PFAS compounds. And the bill did not move. However, when there was a change in administration, we did get a group of folks who were in the state government, in our bureaucracy, who went to work and at the direction of Governor Whitmer, worked to establish those maximum limits for our drinking water in the rules. So we were very successful in actually achieving that. We are one of only 4 states in the nation, I believe, that have similar requirements on drinking water systems. And so I'm very proud of that work, and I think it's a huge step forward. And it's a great model for other states to take a look at if they want to address this issue as well. So those were passed into the rules through the rulemaking process last February. And so we have some assurance that there's a way to filter PFAS out of our drinking water. So if you have a municipal water source, you can take some comfort that they are addressing this. So if you have a well and you know you are in an area where there is a potential threat to your water from PFAS, it would be a great idea to get that tested. I would just like to add too that for some people, those rules came too late, of course, because this substance has been in our water systems for so many decades. And so there are lots of people who have already consumed large amounts of PFAS in their drinking water over the last decades. And so I've also introduced legislation with the support of our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, that would allow the state of Michigan to seek damages on behalf of the public for addressing these emerging contaminants at sites where we're already working to remove other regulated substances. So even years after remediation at contaminated sites, we continue to find new and previously unknown chemicals in our water and in our soil. And we need a reasonable amount of time from the start of that remediation action to restore or replace public resources that have been damaged by these contaminants. So I have legislation that would help us do a better job as a state addressing that. I've introduced another bill that would create a discovery rule with a time limit for bringing claims for those impacted by corporate polluters, so that people who have been impacted by this contamination have a fairer timeline to seek justice and remediation. Right now, it's sometimes possible to have a statute of limitations run out even before people understand that they've been exposed. So it's really not a fair fight if there's a contaminant like PFAS that is impossible to see in your water, it's impossible to taste, and that we have just learned about as a community. So I would also add, there's a couple other pieces of legislation, Senate Bill 591, that was introduced by some folks that are on this call and co-sponsored by, I think, most of us, but we introduced legislation that would prohibit companies from using PFAS or other related chemicals in food packaging, because this is a contamination and a potential exposure that many of us have been exposed to just by eating fast food over the years, and we had no idea. McDonald's did announce that it would end the use of packaging that contains PFAS. And so that's a great step in the right direction. That's a big actor on that in that space, but it just tells you how ubiquitous PFAS is in our environment and in the things that we consume. So let's see. Senator Bayer also has legislation that would require warning labels that would indicate that a product may contain PFAS. And so I have joined her on that legislation as well. And we will advocate for hearings on those, and hopefully we'll make some progress. If there's anything we've learned about PFAS, we know that it is all over Michigan, and we keep finding more about it. So we will need to make sure that we have the tools available to us as a state and as consumers to make sure that we have a fair shot at addressing the contamination and eliminating it from particularly our drinking water. So that's the latest on the PFAS field.
Thank you, Senator Brinks, and thank you to all of you and all of your colleagues for your leadership on this issue. It is significant, as you pointed out, and I do know that a state not too far from us, Minnesota, just passed a piece of legislation banning PFAS in food packaging, and so not to be outdone, I know the state of Michigan can do the same. Moving along, I'd like to pivot back to Representative Jim Ellison. We've been talking a lot about water quality issues that you can't always see with your eyes. But you, in your district, and you've mentioned this already, sometimes there's things as blatant as green ooze. And so while you've touched on this, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, exactly what that green ooze is, and what is happening with it, and how your constituents reacted to the fact that there was green ooze shutting down a highway in your district.
Yeah, I didn't react very well at all. It's not a pretty sight. The history on this site goes back quite a few years. This particular business, Electroplating Services, had a long history of contaminated sites, and they had been cited by Eagle and EPA many times. And the site was declared contaminated a good number of years ago. EPA came in and they cleaned the site up as directed, and the direction was to get rid of the immediate threat. So that's what the EPA did, is they went in there and they cleaned up the site, identifying what was the immediate threat, and they cleaned that up. Oh, that didn't stop the contamination of the site. The contamination continued, but because there wasn't any stipulation for monitoring the site, and the owner had no particular impetus to clean the site, it's just one of those things that it kept, without being seen, it just kept occurring. We actually had a basement full up of contaminated, we don't even know what it was. I know it did have PFAS in it and all the other bad stuff you can think of had actually filled up the basement. There was like a pond. And so when we discovered it, because of the gray news, that brought our attention to investigation. We embarked on a more comprehensive cleanup of the site to get rid of, again, the identified contaminants that we could see. And so that process went on for a long time. It was a big operation. EPA was in there along with Eagle and doing constant monitoring. One of the things we did check is groundwater contamination. Fortunately, our area of the county has no wells per se. Our drinking water is all supplied by the municipal government. So we had a very small worry about well water contamination, and that had to do farther downstream from us, back over in our neighboring counties where people may have wells. But we determined that there wasn't any kind of contaminants that was going after the water. But what we were doing is putting these pollutants into the storm system, and they were eventually going downstream, contaminating some of the tributaries that tie into the 12-town drain or the Red Run Creek, whatever you want to call it, and eventually dumping into Lake St. Clair, which is what Senator Wojno mentioned earlier. Is the lake gets contaminated because it's taking all these contaminants that are overburdening the ability we have right now based on the designs of the facilities when they were built, that we're not catching all this stuff. So we need to increase that process. We need to find better ways to catch these contaminants, catch these bad actors. I mean, in the case of what I had, no one was chasing them, so they didn't try to do anything. They just continued. He wasn't even using the site. This was just stuff that was in the ground that was never taken care of. And so we're at a point right now that we've cleaned up everything we were able to identify on the site, except for the building itself. The building itself has got contaminants on it, and we don't have access to the building because the owner is tied up. The city of Madison Heights received funding from the state to purchase the building so that they could tear it down and remediate it. But the owner of the building is not relinquishing his rights, and they are still stuck in litigation. So in the meantime, that building continues to sit there, it continues to be contaminated, and we're doing the best we can to monitor it. Hopefully, the point will come that the building will be acquired and we can take it down and put an end to this one. But that's just one instance. I mean, there's all kinds of old manufacturing facilities that don't meet requirements that this is happening. And the only way we found this is because the contaminant found a way to expose itself. So if it's not exposing itself, we're not going to see it. And we've got to figure out a way to go after these manufacturers that are using contaminated products and try to stop them before they turn into a crisis. So again, because the green news showed itself, we were able to remediate this one to a point, but it's ongoing. The neighborhood around us continued to support us. They were glad we responded quickly. Eagle responded very quickly, open communications. We had public meetings with the public, so they knew what was going on. And so the process itself was very open and transparent. And we did have the support of the residents of the area. And in the process itself of getting rid of that problem worked very well, but there's more to be done.
Thank you so much, Representative, and for your leadership on this issue. It's incredibly important. This is a perfect pivot to Senator McCann with a question about holding polluters accountable. In your introduction, you mentioned how important this is. I'd love to know if you could address what's being done to hold polluters accountable, what more needs to be done, and especially since for decades we haven't been able to accomplish this.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Absolutely. And of course, there is work to be done, and it's a multi-pronged approach, but we've got some things that are in the process that need to move forward. But, to know where we're going to go, it takes a little bit of perspective to look at where we've been. And actually from 1990 to 1995, Michigan had some of the strongest polluter pay laws in the country. And basically, if a corporation left contamination in our land, air, or water, That corporation was responsible for cleaning up the mess that they made. It's kind of what we get in kindergarten and teach our kids, right? Clean up the mess you made. So, and this kind of accountability made Michigan a leader in environmental cleanup and preservation in that regard. Unfortunately, then in 1995, the administration of former Governor John Engler and the legislature gutted that polluter pay law, and funding for environmental cleanups in Michigan has suffered ever since. Our environmental laws in general have gotten weaker and weaker over the years as Republicans have catered to big corporations more than the people of Michigan and the environment that they wish to have. So for starters, we need to bring back this polluter pay law as it was. And I'm happy to be a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 58, which is put forward by my colleague, Senator Jeff Irwin from Ann Arbor, to do simply that. The bill would require polluters to pay for the messes they make based on a more meaningful standard than is currently the case. Next, we also need to ensure that our policies and guidelines for what is considered a high level of contaminant in drinking water, for instance, is in line with the most up-to-date science. And this is what Senator Brinks has been talking about. And we also saw this with the Flint water crisis, where the federal lead and copper rule is used to determine how and when health officials should react to contaminated drinking water and poor water quality when it reaches a higher than accepted threshold of contamination. And so we know there's no good acceptable amount of lead or copper in our drinking water, and there's no acceptable amount of PFAS in our drinking water or any other pollutant for that matter. So, despite what happened in Flint, Republicans in the legislature have enacted bills to keep it that way, to allow basically the federal government to determine what's best for us in Michigan. And that's called the no stricter than federal mandate. It means Michigan can't set a standard higher than what the federal government sets. And that is basically a low level floor. It sets the standard that does nothing but ensure that more people will consume contaminated water and therefore suffer the health consequences because of it. So I've introduced Senate Bill 147. It simply repeals the no stricter than federal law that was rushed through during a chaotic lame duck session of the legislature, and instead reinstate more local control, state control to do better than the lowest status quo that so far has clearly failed our residents. So, this legislation combined with plenty more that we're hearing about this evening will empower our state agencies to get back to working for the people and to give our people the peace of mind that we have their back and their best interest.
Thank you, Senator McCann. Thank you for your leadership. As you mentioned, there's important work to be done at the state level on these issues. There's important work to be done at the federal level on these issues, but many say that all politics is local. So I'd like to turn to Senator Wojno and ask, what can we do? What can the state do to really have local municipalities and residents take their own water quality fate into their own hands while you're doing important work in Lansing at the state legislative level?
Local governments and residents are some of our best resources and advocates for change. And I think as state legislators, we have to always continue to have an open dialogue with our communities and residents on certain programs or resources that are available to them. For example, last October, Governor Whitmer announced a $500 million investment to rebuild Michigan's water infrastructure under the Michigan Clean Water Plan. But to expand upon the governor's efforts and give more power to locals, I became involved in a legislative package that will provide more funding than what has been available in the past. These bills would allow $290 million of remaining funds from the voter-approved bond from several years ago to be used for the programs envisioned under the Michigan Clean Water Plan, such as septic, PFAS, and storm drains. This money's been completely unused up to this point, and we can authorize it to be used for even more environmental purposes because that need is so great now. But these bills also allow the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy to create a low or no interest loan program for residents to replace and repair septic systems. About 30% of Michigan households still utilize on-site sanitary systems to manage the residential wastewater, and they know immediately when a problem happens. Our legislation would allow homeowners on existing septic systems an easy to access option for fixing issues when it's discovered. The two bills, Senate Bills 319 and 320, put the power of change in the hands of residents and local communities who know their water issues best. This legislation has already been approved in committee, and we're working on it now to get it moved through the Senate when we turn to the session next month.
Thank you very much, Senator Wojno. We are running close on time here, but I think we have some time to take some questions from our wonderful audience. So I'm going to turn things over to our virtual moderator and take a few questions from all of you. So Taylor, can I turn this to you and you can take it from here?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Before we do get to your questions, I do want to quickly just highlight the results of that first poll question that we took. So just to refresh everyone's memory, we did ask, which is your favorite Great Lake? Outstandingly here, it looks like the majority of participants on today's call have voted for Michigan. Look at that, everyone. Great. Thank you all so much for your feedback. I do want to run just one more poll again here just before we do take your live questions. So real quickly, get those phone keypads out once more here. How do you like to enjoy Michigan's natural resources? So pressing 1 for hiking, press 2 for kayaking or canoeing, press 3 for camping, press 4 for fishing, or press 5 for other. And again, if you're participating via Zoom, you can see that poll 2 has just popped up on your Zoom platform. So go ahead and submit your choice, and we appreciate it. Again, how do you like to enjoy Michigan's natural resources? Be pressing 1 for hiking, press 2 for kayaking or canoeing, press 3 for camping, press 4 for fishing, or you can press 5 for other. And again, you can press 0 on your phone keypad to get your question in line. If you are participating via Zoom, submit your question by using the chat feature on your Zoom platform. And for those folks on Facebook, go ahead and leave a comment with your question. And again, you still have that option of pressing 7 to provide one of our operators with your email address to receive all updates moving forward. So with that, I want to get right to your live caller questions here. First up, we have John, and John's question, I'm going to direct this to Senator Brinks. John, you are now live. Welcome to our call. Please go ahead.
Hi, yes. I'd like to raise attention and ask for help from the senators on the call for a problem that we're facing. We've actually been doing inland lake restoration for over 15 years in the state of Michigan. We're a clean water innovator. Our biggest impediment to growth and to cleaning up more lakes is regulatory insanity. I can't think of a better word for it, by Eagle. So to give a concrete example of that, we use all non-toxic, very well-backed, scientifically backed technologies and strategies to clean lakes, to prevent blue-green algae and reduce invasive species. The permit costs for our technologies are 50 times higher and take 100 times more time to obtain than permits for dumping toxic chemicals into lakes, such as copper sulfate, to kill weeds and algae, and all the science proves harm lake ecosystems. Yet we are being targeted by Eagle and other natural strategies such as dash harvesting of invasive species and being regulated out of the state because of their bias. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're in league with the chemical companies or they just don't like things that are innovative and new. But I would really like help to address this issue. We're now getting permits randomly denied by Eagle on projects with no scientific basis for their decisions.
Yeah, thanks for your question, John. I have gotten a couple of emails about this, and so we have begun the process of kind of asking some questions of the department to get their perspective as well. It's always excuse me, it's always a tricky balance of making sure that we have proper safeguards in place when there's anything new that comes along that somebody says that, you know, this is the answer to the problem that we have. And so part of our government departments is making sure that we are doing our due diligence to ensure that those things are actually and truly safe remedies for the problem they attempt to solve. So I know that can be very frustrating for people, and it's incredibly frustrating when the pace of government moves much slower than the urgency of the problem that you are trying to solve. And so we experience that as legislators too. There are lots of things that we'd like to fix and we want to fix them yesterday. But going through those proper procedures to ensure that something is, one, a proper use and safe, not just for our water, but for all the creatures and plants that rely on that water, is something that's really important. So I don't want to diminish what the department does. And at the same time, I do hear your frustration. And to the extent possible, we should be, at the very least, promoting a better way to process proposed solutions than to allow contamination to continue. So if what you suggest is true and there's really a dissonance there with those timelines in terms of approvals, that's certainly something that we as legislators can ask some questions about and try to help the department streamline their processes and to do an effective job with that. Another thing that happens a lot is that departments don't have adequate resources to get to things in a timely manner. And that is something that every single legislator on this call has been frustrated with. It's true for all kinds of departments that keep us safe. And so that's another thing that, it's not an excuse when it comes to the process that you're trying to work through. But I'm sure that each of us can help with this conversation when we return to the office in Lansing. So I can promise you we'll ask some questions about it and we'll do what we can.
Well, I appreciate that answer. And thank you so much, John, for participating on this live forum. It looks like we have another question here coming in from Jan in Kalamazoo. And Senator McCann, this one's going to you here. Jan's asking, it sounds like all Michigan water is polluted. Is this true? And are there areas that are better than others?
Wow, well, thanks, Jan. Clearly there are some waters that are better than others. And in fact, the caller that we just heard from last is really, amongst the group of people that are good citizens trying to improve water quality in lakes and rivers across our state. And to those folks, we salute them. And, as we've sort of talked about in this forum tonight, there have been, a lot of challenges created by polluters that we're now trying to undo. I think about PFAS in Oscoda, lakes around the state, invasive species that we combat that are more of a natural threat. And then, the oil spill I mentioned here, we've had a long cleanup process of the Kalamazoo River that I've been a part of for decades, going back to when I was on the Kalamazoo City Commission. And we've been trying to get PCBs out of the Kalamazoo River, which are part of the paper making legacy. And those chemicals were dumped into our rivers as well. So I think that, it's a range. There are some very pristine waters and there are some very challenged waterways. And we want to get all of our water across the state of Michigan protected, restored, underground, above ground, swimming, drinking, the whole gamut. And I think that that's something that the League of Conservation Voters is a big part of here, why they're putting this on this evening. And it's why we're all participating, because we want to see all of our waterways as clean as possible. So thanks, Jan.
Yeah, thank you, Jan, so much for that question. Looks like we have another caller here. We have Senia in Grand Rapids who would rather not go live here as well. And this is for you, Senator Brinks. So she's asking, how are the health issues inherited from the river and everything dumped in it? How will we be compensated for these generations of health issues directly related? And how will we be able to stop this?
Yeah, that's, you present a problem that is really one of the big questions in the health and environmental spheres. And when we talk about policy, that is not lost on us. So the first thing I would say is that the best thing we can do is prevention. Make sure that the water that we encounter, whether it's through recreation or through drinking water or through bathing and cleaning, is actually safe, so that we can prevent any future problems for children now throughout their lifetimes. We know that things can impact us. Lead, for instance, is a key example. That early exposure when you're a small child is just critical. And so it is, it can cause so much harm. And if we can prevent those kinds of things, that should be our first order of business. One of our difficulties with the way our system is set up is that it is very difficult to hold people responsible if there is not 100% certainty through documented scientific studies and health studies that a certain chemical that you were exposed to in a certain place and time is actually responsible for your specific health problem. So the legal structure makes it very difficult for us to actually put all of those facts together and make a strong case. And so I think that there are ways that we can improve the laws around that. When there's a preponderance of evidence, and when there's known exposures, and when there's people who have lived in a specific place for many years. But it is difficult to make that case in a court of law sometimes. So it's a challenge that I don't have a great solution to, but big picture wise, I think what you can ask is that we ask companies to contribute to remediation of all chemical contamination, that businesses and manufacturers and various kinds of businesses throughout our history have been known to cause. So it is not an unrealistic expectation to expect them as a whole to fund the problems that have been caused by them as a whole, that people in regular households have had to live with consequences of. And so that really comes down to essentially basic tax code and the way that we as a state go about cleaning things up, holding companies responsible when we can. But in some cases, like the case that Representative Ellison was talking about, the owner of that company has no resources. He's been bankrupt. And so, and I believe it may be incarcerated or has been. So there's very little money there to take from him to fix it. And so that causes a problem for us. And we've chosen as a state and as a government to say, this is not okay. Even if he can't pay for it, we're going to ask our taxpayers to all chip in, and we're going to take care of this to prevent harm to all the rest of our constituents. So we try to work on things like that. We try to make sure there's adequate funding in our coffers so that we can address those issues. But it is incredibly difficult sometimes to do that. So I appreciate the question, and for any of our listeners, if they've got good ideas of solutions to suggest to us, I know that we are certainly open to that.
All right, well, thank you so much for that, Senator Brinks, really appreciate you. And it looks like we are getting close to our allotted time here. So, and we did, answer as many questions. Thank you so much, Senators. We sincerely value and appreciate all of our listeners' time tonight. So Lisa, please, if you could prompt each of our senators for a few closing remarks and then go ahead and bring us to the finish line.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. And thanks for all the excellent questions and the great discussion among our speakers. Water truly is life, and it defines us here in Michigan, more so than in almost any other state. We're literally enveloped by it, and it's one of our greatest assets. And so ensuring that we have clean, safe, affordable drinking water for everybody and maintaining the health of our Great Lakes is critical, not only for human health and the quality of life here, but frankly for our economy. We know that when we protect our drinking water, we create opportunities to put people to work, to revitalize and improve our water systems. So I just want to do a quick plug. If you want more information about Michigan LCV, please visit our website at www.michiganlcv.org. But more importantly, I invite our senators and state representative to share any final remarks. I'll start at the top, as we did at the beginning. Senator Rosemary Bayer. Oops, you're muted.
So sorry. I thought I got that. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me today. And I wanted to remind everyone that we are surrounded by 86% of the country's fresh water. And so our economy depends on it, our health depends on it. We need to think of ourselves as water guardians and take action now to protect the water and the species who live in it and the people of Michigan who drink it. Water quality really does affect us all. So time for us to get to work. There's nothing more vital to be working on. And I thank you again for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Winnie Brinks.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm really inspired by the conversation tonight and by my colleagues and the work that they've been doing in our legislature to protect water and to help people have confidence in the water that they're getting from their tap. We all believe that water is a human right, and we have to continue this work of strengthening water quality standards, holding polluters accountable, ensuring that those adversely affected by contaminants in our water have recourse if they're suffering. For too long, this precious natural resource and vital component of our economy has been taken for granted. So I look forward to continuing to be a voice for our constituents on these matters, to working with my colleagues to get these ideas across the finish line, and to ensuring that the next affected family or community can stand firm in their right to safe, accessible, affordable, and clean water. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Senator Brinks. Let's turn to Senator McCann.
Thank you very much. I know that our time is short, and so I'll just wrap up by thanking the LCV for involving me in this great event. I know that if there are unanswered questions, any other constituents out there in Kalamazoo County, please just Google me on the internet and contact me. I'd be glad to get to any of your other questions that maybe didn't get answered this evening. But again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to the Michigan League of Conservation Voters.
Thank you, Senator McCann. And Senator Wojno, up over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And of course, thank you to the LCV as well for your involvement and support on these important water quality issues. You know, it's going to take all of us and all these ideas get Michigan where it ought to be when it comes to improving our water quality. There is no silver bullet to address these issues. And I think it's clear from this panel that we have a lot of work to do in Michigan, but I'm proud to be a part of this group of legislators committed to do that. I look forward to making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And again, last but not least, Representative Jim Ellison.
Thank you, Lisa. First of all, thank you to the LCV, and thank you for including me as a state representative to join this discussion with my four esteemed colleagues and the senator side of the House. But remember this particular polluter that I had in my district. He had violations growing for 20 years, and Eagle did not have the resources to enforce a lot of these legislations. We need to give them more resources, more people, and the ability to clamp down on this stuff. I've introduced a bill, House Bill 5453, which will eliminate the current 15-year statute of limitations and make the statute of limitations go away, because right now the polluters have the opportunity to try to wait out the statute. And we've got to make that stop, because at 20 years of this guy, we could have had him a while ago. So, but again, thank you. I've enjoyed this very stimulating conversation, and the battle continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And I want to close out by thanking everyone for joining us this evening. This has been, as you said, Representative, a very stimulating conversation, a very important conversation about issues that matter everywhere across the state. Safe, clean, affordable drinking water is something that we all need and deserve. So thank you to all of our listeners and our watchers. I hope that you have a great rest of your evening. Take good care.